This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Watch the greenbacks tumble.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USAPrepares.com. Broadcasting 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. There's a link to all of your instructors on the website, USAPREPARES.com. Podcasts are free. Converging threats are confronted daily by your instructors. I'm Vincent Finelli. Aaron's engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. Ed Marvinney's with us. Welcome, Ed Marvinney.
Good morning, Vince. Great to talk to you again, and thank you for having me on.
Ed, you know, it's always delightful being with you, and I'd just like to take a minute and share how we met. Years ago, I was on another network, and the owner of the network said, "Hey, Vinny, I had just started." And he said, "Vinny, we're going to do a fundraiser," which really meant I was going to be doing a fundraiser. So I was behind the microphone here in Missouri asking for money to be donated to the station. I said, I'll do it, but reluctantly, I really don't want to do it. But if I do it, I would like the names, email addresses, and phone numbers of everyone who contributes so I can email them and call them. And I called Ed Marvinney because he had donated. And I think Ed was a little bit surprised that I called him to thank him. And what I wanted to do was make sure that I knew how much each person contributed, so I would match it dollar for dollar up to $1,000. And that's what I did. So we became friends, and Ed decided that my website needed some help. And he took it upon himself to rewrite the entire website and teach me how to use the new tools with WordPress. And after that, Ed came up to a meetup in Springfield, Missouri at Ziggy's, and he spent some time here at the farm, and he was interested in learning about farmland, and I took him around to see what farmland looked like and taught him a little bit about some of the attributes to consider when you buy a farm. He's been to the Get Prepared Expo, he stayed at the farm, and we've become good friends. Is that close, Ed?
That's right on, Vince. We had communicated on the other network. I was really quite surprised, as you mentioned, that you called me, and we spoke briefly. And right about that time, I had been looking for property. Plan B, whatever you want to call it, retirement. I wanted to just sort of take some of what was my hard-earned money out of the market, because I am no stockbroker, I'll tell you that. And I wanted to invest in something tangible. So I had been looking for property for all of 2012. And just about the time that we met, I came out to Missouri and Arkansas, and we started looking around. And that's when we drove up to the meetup and met with you, because I had heard you so many times on the radio, and it sounded like such a great thing and a great group of people that I really wanted to come and introduce myself.
Ed, let me ask you this.
Sure.
What was your reaction when you came to the meetup? Was it what you thought it was going to be, or was it different?
No, it pretty much was what I thought it was going to be. I had pictured something a little different as far as the location, but the experience was everything I had expected of it. The people were all super friendly, and everyone was really interested in the topics that were being brought up during the meetups. And I think it's a great way, grassroots way, to actually get people involved and give them some information that they may not receive through traditional means. TV, radio, et cetera, et cetera.
And wouldn't you say that people could do what we do in their communities on a weekly or every 2 weeks or once a month basis? Don't you think that others could do the same thing across the nation? I do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, and I do believe that it's important to actually be in front of each other and to have that camaraderie and build those relationships, because that's essentially the same way that I've built my business. It's all about relationships. When someone knows you, they understand your character, your integrity. They know who you are and what you're all about. Those are the strongest relationships that you will ever build in your life.
And you're absolutely right. And I get calls from Dr. Richard Allen Miller frequently. I mean, we're buddies too, and your name comes up pretty often because you're helping him with with his website. And let me just say who Ed Marvinney is. Ed Marvinney is a martial artist. He's a rancher, and he owns a company called UserSight.com, USERSIGHT.com. He's the CEO of UserSight, and his company is a web development company. So he's helping Rick Miller and me and a bunch of others. And you've been involved in large projects, haven't you?
I have. For about 18 years, I worked in the corporate world for various companies, such as IBM, Office Depot, amongst others. I've worked in consulting firms, which we did large-scale enterprise work for Texaco, Lockheed Martin, New York Islanders, several different major Fortune 500 companies. And
wow.
it took me about 18 years to transition. I always knew that I wanted to be in business for myself, because I really understood that when you work for someone else, you have a very limited scope of what you offer, what your job role or function is within that organization. And typically, there may be few opportunities for you to grow, change, explore. And also, at the end of the day, you're just collecting a paycheck. You're not building anything that is yours. And that was probably my biggest concern. I knew this fairly early on in my career and wanted desperately to transition to a small business, but I didn't really understand or have the capability to offer or to know what small businesses needed. What could I provide them with? What could I do to help them that would also help me become successful and profitable in my own business? And it took a long time to really transition from that corporate world to the small business world.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you this: could you go back?
Oh, certainly not. I would never. I would never. As like you, I'm not very good in taking direction. I like to give my opinion and express my view. I'm not overly pushy, but if I see something that can be improved, or if I feel that something is being done wrong, I like to give my feedback. And a lot of times, that doesn't work very well in the corporate world. So I bumped heads quite a bit in several companies, and it helped. It helped me along to figure that my path should be on my own versus in a large organization. I think one of the largest, most significant things that stand out in my mind is when I worked for IBM, they always did their cuts, their employee cuts, the week before the holidays.
Right.
And I cannot tell you how horrible that was, because for the entire month of December, people were ducking under their desks. They were just hiding their heads like ostriches in the sand, and just you couldn't get any work done because everyone was so concerned whether or not they were going to have a job come Hanukkah, Christmas, what have you. And that really impacted me very much, and really just made me decide that, you know what, I've got to do something now because I don't want a career. You look at all these large companies back in the 40s and 50s, GM, all the car companies, yeah, they had pensions, they had all these wonderful things, and look what that's all gotten them now.
Right. And I remember my dad saying to me when I graduated college in the 70s, you know, why don't you get a job with a big company and, you know, have some security and settle within that company and grow with that company. And then I remember a little later on saying, Dad, you talking about IBM? They're laying off 10,000 a week, 15,000 a week. I said, come Fridays, people are scared to death that their way of life is going to change on that day, on Friday, when IBM would lay off 10 to 15,000 at a crack. And they weren't the only ones. And as you said, major corporations were doing the same thing. They were wiping out the white-collar workers and the blue-collar workers. I mean, it's unbelievable. And now if you look, you know, the security that working for a company for 40 years and getting that gold watch and having a retirement is all but evaporated. I mean, it really has evaporated. I don't know anyone who's worked for a company for 20 years. I don't.
Well, I think in today's day and age, it's non-existent. It's the whole paradigm has changed. I know some IBMers who have been there for life, and God bless, that's wonderful. They've had, you know, extraordinary careers there, and I applaud them. But times have changed so significantly that it would never be the way it was back in the, you know, the 50s or so, where you were a lifer. I know maybe one company that I know people can actually retire from down here in Florida, but that's extremely, extremely rare. So I wouldn't rely on it these days, especially with the way things are. You look at the restructuring of the auto manufacturers. Look what they did to restructure their pensions, and the government had to step in to bail them out.
Yeah. Ed Marvinney's with us. We're going to be back. Let's talk about karate, martial arts, when we come back. A lot of background noise here at the farm. The heavy equipment is excavating for the barn, and so you hear backup alarms and engines roaring and buckets of dirt dumping. Ed, you are a martial artist. You've been training for a long time. Taekwondo is one of the styles that you participate in. And let's take a minute or two or three or four. We mentioned it at the top of the hour that you're involved in this. What are your thoughts on martial arts training versus real life street fighting versus when you actually have to deploy these skills on the street?
Well, I was very fortunate to have someone introduce me to the sport of Taekwondo several years ago. And I had always wanted to participate in a martial art and just never knew where or what. So this was a great opportunity. And the moment that I started, I absolutely loved it. It was an entirely different type of physical fitness. The aerobic activity was just extraordinary. I had worked out, lifted weights and things a lot through my adolescence, in my 20s and 30s. So this was an entirely different type of workout, which I just absolutely loved. So I stuck with it for several years and enjoyed every minute of it. But there's a big difference depending on what styles you take on. Defending yourself and sparring, let's say, for instance. Normally, with most of the competitive martial arts, you are taught, especially in Taekwondo, it's great, a lot of kicking, punching, but your sparring, it's really never meant to be used on the street, because essentially you're scoring for points. And it's not even on the level of Olympic Taekwondo, where you can literally knock someone out with a spinning back kick or any of the other types of kicks that are available. So really, it's sparring for points. So as soon as you make contact, the referee stops and will give you a point and stops both the participants, moves them away. So it really has nothing to do with what would happen if you were out on the street and someone came up on you and asked you for the time, and the next thing you know, you're getting hit in the face. They're two entirely different paradigms, and I think martial arts, some of them, don't sufficiently teach you how to defend against real street violence.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
That is really the big key, because there were numerous students in my class, wonderful people, high-level, high-ranking black belts, but if they really were in a street situation, I really don't know if they'd be ready if something had happened. And I wasn't ready as well. You think you're ready, but since leaving the sport of Taekwondo, I've trained in some other methods, and it's more practical and streetwise. So it's a much, much different type of training that really focuses on, well, if violence does come to you, what do you do? How do you diffuse that, and how do you take the fight to the attacker and take them out of the fight as quickly as possible?
Well, you're absolutely right. I was introduced to Taekwondo back in the 70s by Eric Lee. He was great at teaching us, and some of our sparring partners were women, and it was really just I was taught never to hit a woman, and that was always in the back of my mind. And then punching a woman in the chest, it just seemed wrong to me. And so you're absolutely right. And a couple of days ago, about a week ago, I guess, our son came to the farm, and I looked at him, and from 10 feet away, it looked like his hand was really swollen. And I said, "Hey, what happened to your hand?" He goes, "You really want to know?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I was in a really bad situation. It looked like I was going to be attacked, and I just had to break this guy's nose." And so he didn't use his martial arts training. Ed Marvinney's with us. He's the CEO of usersight.com, usersight.com. It's a web development company. He built the website that you see me use every day. He's built the tools, and sometimes I comment on, I really appreciate what Ed has done to allow me the technology to post on the website, usaprepares.com, during the breaks and after the broadcast and before the broadcast. I really appreciate it, Ed. You've done a fabulous job. And I know Rick Miller appreciates what you've done for him. Ed, I just got an email from a person on Facebook, and he says he can't wait for the dollar collapse because 50% of unprepared America will die out very fast, and illegals will leave because of no more freebies. And he talks about keep voting your hope and change. And I guess he's really, really frustrated, and I don't think he really believes it or wants people to die. But his point is very, very accurate. America will not be able to survive with a dollar collapse. I came back from a meeting with the general manager of Leclerc Electric yesterday, and we talked about the power grid, and I mentioned that 95% of America will die, in my opinion, according to the government reports, should there be a grid collapse for 14 days. and because of the supply line disruption. Now, you are very concerned about tough times ahead, I know, and I believe you think that, as a lot of people in the cities don't see it the way we in the country see it. Want to talk about that?
Oh, sure. There is just such a vast difference. Folks in the city, they are just going about their business as life is, everything's great. And, when I speak to folks out in the country, they see more of the writing on the wall. I think people in more rural areas are used to being more self-sufficient. They have to count on themselves. They have to rely on themselves because no one is going to come and save them. Or if there's help, it's going to take quite a long time for it to arrive before anything can happen. So it's just a complete shift in mentality. I think the folks in the city, they tune into the news, and they're believing, they took the blue pill, and they're believing everything that's being said on TV. I don't wish to see any of this happen, but as we were talking about, you look at the big car companies and what they had to do to restructure pensions. Well, as John Reagan speaks about, you look at what the government's doing. And the government took in $2.6 trillion in tax revenue, and they spent $2.5 trillion just for mandatory entitlements like Social Security and interest on the debt. So right off the bat, we're spending more than we've got. And we've got all these baby boomers that are going to be out of their spending years and into their retirement and conserving years. So we're looking about taking all of that capital out of the market because all of these retirees aren't going to be spending because they're not generating the income the same way. So yeah, it's going to really be some interesting times ahead, and I really don't think too many people are looking at it that way.
And it's as simple as, when you talk about people who live in the city, it's as simple as this to me. When I go out, if I'm going to hop in the truck and go somewhere, or if I'm going to hop in the car and go somewhere, if I want to have some coffee, I will bring it with me. And if I'm going to be gone for half a day, I'll probably bring a thermos with me. It does not occur to me to stop at a Starbucks and buy a cup of coffee because I'm thirsty. It does not occur to me to do that. I will have something to drink, something to eat in my vehicle with me before I leave. I have never been to a Starbucks, but I can tell you this. I have had a cup of coffee because I mentioned for weeks that, I can't believe people go to Starbucks and buy coffee at $4 and $5 a cup. It makes no sense to me. But one of the class members at the meetup on Monday night, his name is Garland. Garland handed me, I walked in the door and there it was. He handed me a cup of Starbucks just so I couldn't say it anymore. That I've never had a cup of Starbucks coffee. So he just handed it to me and left. Just, what? So you're right. We in the country have to take care of ourselves and our family and our friends and our neighbors. That's just what we do. We check on each other and so forth. But one of the things that you're concerned with is, well, of course, is self-sufficiency, and that's why you bought a ranch. You want to talk about that, and you want to talk about that in association with living on less than 100% of a person's current income? Maybe 50%, maybe 25%?
Sure. That was one of the biggest concerns back when we originally met was, well, what's going to happen? What am I going to do? I had been in the corporate world and saving, putting in my annual contributions to my 401k plan, and I just saw it eroding before my eyes, and I really didn't know what to do. I'm not particularly savvy when it comes to the stock market, so I don't know. I can't time things. I don't know what the right play is. So I decided that I wanted something tangible, as you speak of all the time. If you don't own it, you don't have it. So I wanted some real estate, and I'd come out to Missouri and looked at the, the 80 acres adjacent to yours.
Yeah, what'd you think of that?
Oh, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was just a wonderful track. And if I was closer, I probably would have jumped right on it. However,
Ed, that sold for, I think, $127,000.
yep, and that was, I believe, what you had told me. And it's a wonderful piece of property, and to be right next door to you is also a wonderful thing. But for us, it's a long haul. I mean, it's probably at least a full 24 hours driving just to get there. So it was a little bit further than I could stretch because, I have a business to run and I can't be gone for any extended periods of time. So we started looking more along the East Coast, and we found it was a foreclosure. And it's a great piece of property. And it was just an opportunity that just presented itself. We had been looking and just got super lucky, and just coincided with the mortgage rates being probably at historical lows. So I was able to acquire this ranch, and it's just pretty much been my pet project for the last year and a half now.
So tell us can you describe the ranch and what your concerns are that you have prepared for and are preparing for at this ranch, this Plan B. Now, it may even be a Plan A, right?
Well, I believe it's going to be a retirement home as I start to, because, theoretically, you look at the way the market's going, I could continue to contribute year after year, and I don't know really where that money's going to go. But, however, if I take that money that I would have contributed into a 401k or such, and I put that into tangible assets, which is something you always discuss, I know I can keep that and I can build upon that tract of land and have something that will sustain myself and my family and, God willing, be there for the future. So it just seems a much, much better use of my money at this point in time. So we've spent the last year, it's 24 acres, and it's on the side of a mountain, and it's got a beautiful view, and it's got horse stables, and it's just it's a wonderful place. And I think we're getting more out of that now than we would ever have in 20 years from now, when I would have planned to retire or been able to take that money penalty-free out of my IRA. So we're enjoying the experience, and I have to say that the folks that we've met are just wonderful, just super down-to-earth, nice people, and my neighbors all throughout the area are just great people. I've helped many of them with things, however I can, whether it's baling hay, feeding the cows, helping them move things, whatever it is. It's just being a good neighbor and helping people, which I believe that's what it's all about, is really treating people the way you want to be treated. And I experienced that a lot more up there than I have here.
When you say here, you mean in Florida. So here's the question, Ed Marvinney. When you work and live among those in the countryside, and you compare that to working and living among those in the cityscape, do you find that there is more openness, more communication, more willingness to do things together in the country than in the city? Meaning, do you know your neighbors even though they're farther away? Do you have a chance to know your neighbors better in the country than in the city?
I think so. I've become extremely close with my next door neighbors in a short period of time, and I have to tell you that I believe that I'm closer to them than I am to most folks on my street. And I've been living in the same location for 10 years now.
Well, that's been my experience also. Living in the suburbs compared to, many, many decades ago, compared to living in the country for the last several decades. Okay, so When you look at income and when you look at making cuts, assuming that a person would have to, let's say we lose our job and we have to live on less. Let's take a few minutes when we come back from this break and let's talk about what do you cut? How do you determine what to cut? And how long might you survive with less income? Ed Marvinney, CEO, usersite.com. Link on the bottom of page 1, usaprepares.com instructors. We'll be right back. Ed Marvinney's with us, usersite.com, usersight.com. He's the man who built the website for usaprepares.com. So when you go to it, you'll see his work. Hey, thanks so much for doing that, Ed. When you look at living on less, cutting items out of your budget, how do you look at that, Ed? You've done it.
I sure have, Vince. I just recently had a real nice sports car that I recently sold. I had it. It was a 40th present for my 40th birthday to myself, and I bought it. It was at a certain point in my life, and then a couple of years later, I figured, you know what, it was time. I enjoyed it, but it was time to sell it, and I've really been the last few years, ever since we've met, I've really been paring down what I have and considering just living on less, because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. We look at history, and I think everyone should really understand what the Great Depression was all about. Because life will go on. It's just a matter of what and for whom. So there are going to be
really good point, Ed.
Folks are going to be able to survive. There's going to be some that are going to do real well. They're going to be millionaires, billionaires, because you know what? They've got cash sitting on the sidelines just waiting. And, there are a lot of folks out there that are experiencing hard times. And just think, if you're employed, what if your employer loses 50% of their contracts? Well, guess what, guys? That's going to affect you. Their bottom line directly affects you. So if you have an employee mentality, I really highly stress that you start thinking more like an employer rather than, I'm just going to go in, do my 8 hours, and then go home. Because those are the type of folks that, you know what, they're always blindsided when there are job cuts. And they don't have a plan B. They don't have any backup reserves. They don't have anything. And they're basically left out in the cold. And I certainly vowed that I did not want to be someone in that type of situation.
And I mentioned that I'm building this barn. And I mention it for a lot of reasons. One, that what farming is like and some of the challenges that we have, and we talk about them in real time and as they're progressing. And I needed to buy some rebar, that reinforced concrete bar. It comes in 20-foot lengths, half-inch in diameter. And I needed to buy about 100 sticks of it. And I found out that, so I placed some calls to find out how much it was, and I decided to buy a bundle of it. A bundle is 2,000 pounds, 150 sticks, more than I need. And I'm going to sell the balance of what I don't need on Craigslist. But the point is, I called around for pricing. And the thing that I couldn't get over was no one really cared whether I bought it or not. No one that I talked to seemed to have any idea that if I was building something that needed 3,000 feet of reinforced bar to go in concrete, that I probably need some wood, nails, and screws, and a whole bunch of other stuff to go on top of the concrete. But they weren't smart enough to say, I'll tell you what, do you have any other needs? And maybe we should set up an account with you. And if we give you a discount, are you interested in buying more from us for the rest of that project? No one was bright enough to do that. No one.
That's amazing. And I think had you been speaking to the owner of that business, he sure would have sensed that a million miles away. He would have said, wow, there is something really substantial going on here, and I should really speak to this fella in detail. And that's a lot of times when salespeople, they're just looking for the easy sale. They're not.
I don't know if we got disconnected from Ed Marvinney or not. You back, Ed? I think we lost him again. But Ed's right. They're looking for the salespeople, the hourly employees are looking for the minimum amount of effort in many, many cases. And they need to think more like the boss to help preserve their own job. Think about that. Think about that. Coming up next, Shane Harger. He's been fired, and I believe he might even be in danger. He's a police chief, CSPOA police chief. He'll be on in right after the top of the hour news and commercial announcements. I'm Vin Finelli. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2 of USAPrepares.com. Shane Harger's with us, and Shane Harger is a former chief of police of Jemez Springs, New Mexico. I met Shane at a CSPOA, Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association convention in Las Vegas. We spent some time together. We've been behind the microphones together. Welcome, Shane Harger.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You're certainly welcome. Shane, you've become fairly well known because you were fired, we believe, as a result of signing a document that says that you were reaffirming your oath of office to protect and defend we the people from enemies, foreign and domestic, and that you were going to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America and the Bill of Rights. And so you signed on to the CSPOA document, the very same document that I signed on. And 2 days after you signed it, you arrived back at your office in Jemez Springs, New Mexico, and were summarily fired. Well, there was the process began to fire you. Isn't that right?
That's correct. As strange as it sounds, sometimes truth is stranger than fiction, is it not?
Yeah. Well, and let's carry that forward. So. Then going forward, you spent some time at the Bundy Ranch. Sheriff Richard Mack was at the Bundy Ranch, and you were protecting we the people, including Bundy, from the threat and the assault by the federal government's Bureau of Land Management. You were there. You've had a weapon, a loaded weapon, pointed right at you, ready to execute you by a federal agent. Is that right?
That's correct.
Mm-hmm. And then, and you were in the midst of some others who volunteered to come down there, supposed volunteers to come down or come out to the Bundy Ranch to help defend the Bundys from the federales. And a couple of the people who were there, who were there because people who were with you met them, were involved in a shooting that killed two police officers in Las Vegas. Isn't that right?
It's very tragic, Vince. It really is. I'd like to take this opportunity to say that my heart goes out to my fellow brothers and sisters of law enforcement, those that, while simply being amongst the citizens and eating their lunch were executed for no reason, without just cause. It's a travesty, and my heart goes out to those families. I can only imagine what their agencies are going through, those that they worked with and served alongside. It's very difficult for me to even talk about. I know that there's so many souls out there that are hurting right now as a result of this. But yes, at the Bundy Ranch, there were two individuals that were out there that just seemed to be usurpers, if you would. They weren't there. You could just get the feeling when you're around these people, they weren't there to help. They weren't there for the sake of simply observing. They were just weird. There's something wrong with these people. You ever get your spider senses start to tingle, figuratively speaking?
Sure.
And so
sure.
I don't recall which which one of the militia members it was, but one of the militia members asked them to leave, and they did. They left. Unfortunately, this same couple attended, well, let me back up. There was a constitutional sheriff and peace officers open forum that was advertised in Las Vegas. And so this was just a meet and greet, a who's who, and people from the public were invited to attend to learn about what the CSPOA was all about, and that we were there to educate people about the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and what the true role of a law enforcement officer is, which is to serve and protect. Those officers that lost their lives those days, on that fateful day, they were doing just that. They were just serving and protecting, being amongst the community. And that's what this CSPOA meeting was about, an open forum to educate the public. Believe it or not, as chance, and I want to reiterate that word, as chance would have it, these two individuals that allegedly shot and killed themselves attended the CSPOA open forum and requested to have their picture taken with none other than Sheriff Richard Mack. Now, I'm sorry, but a reasonable person has to look at this. If you look at all these shootings, the Aurora, Colorado shooting, Columbine, et cetera, one after the next, in every single one of these shootings, they had the same theme. There was always this common thread. You're looking at someone who, was in some way infatuated with the Batman stuff or this gothic dress. They were heavy into these psychotropic drugs, be it prescription or otherwise, and, heavy ties to some type of an MK Ultra program. And then in every case, it was somehow blamed on constitutionalists, libertarians, Ron Paul, Alex Jones, Sheriff Mack. And so as a trained investigator, I just have to stop, take a look, and say, what's really going on here? What are your thoughts on that, Vince?
Well, I can tell you that I've spent quite a bit of time with Sheriff Richard Mack one-on-one. He's been to several of our Get Prepared Expos. And while he was at the expos, I would stop and talk with him, privately, in groups. I introduced him on stage. I've broadcasted with him. I've sat opposite him at lunch, at a restaurant. I really like Richard Mack, and I haven't seen anything that would lead me to believe he's anything other than honest and has the utmost integrity. And I've asked him point blank, have you ever drawn your weapon on someone? Have you ever had to scuffle, tase, beat up, slug? The answer is no. The answer is no, he has not. And he told me that, he would say to someone, if he had to take him to jail, he could say, look, why don't we do this the easy way? And we'll put you in handcuffs and we'll take you to jail. Rather than slug it out and tase and, gang up and pile up on somebody. So Richard Mack is the kind of guy that I'd want to have as my sheriff. As a matter of fact, I asked him if I should run for sheriff, and he said, can't you find somebody else? He'd rather have me behind the microphone than be a sheriff. I'd like to try both. But I really like Richard Mack. And when you talk about pictures being taken with Richard Mack and others, at the Get Prepared Expo, I saw it. People who he didn't know would walk up to him and say, can I get my picture with you? And they'd hand their camera to someone else who nobody knew and say, would you take a picture of, me and Richard Mack? So I saw these kinds of things happening over and over. It happened with Joyce Riley. It happened with Dr. Joel Wallach, Dr. Norm Shealy. With people who are in our public personalities, it happens a lot. So I can understand how a picture could be taken of Richard Mack and of someone in the audience, and how, when people ask to have their picture taken with me, which is pretty rare, I say sure. I don't say, wait a minute, you need to be vetted. I don't do that, and I don't think very many others do either. So back to you.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm very upset over the way the media is manipulating and trying to create this story, this persona that, a respected sheriff like Richard Mack, who has literally dedicated his life, his adult life, to defending the freedoms and liberties of the citizens he was sworn to protect, and aiding fellow police officers in their fight to serve and protect their citizens, and somehow, in any way, condoned or promoted the mass murder of fellow police officers. That is so disgusting. I'm shaking right now. I'm so furious to think that someone would be so slimy. Who is the slimy, sadistic idiot that came up with this idea to paint, Sheriff Richard Mack as some kind of a cult leader promoting someone to go out and murder his fellow brothers and sisters of law enforcement?
Mm-hmm. Well, Shane, I can tell you on numerous occasions when Richard Mack was at the Get Prepared Expo, I've offered to put him up at the farm, along with others who are involved with USA Prepares and the Get Prepared Expo. And I would not do that if I had the slightest inkling that he was anything other than above board and had the highest level of integrity. I've seen him up close. I've been in a truck with him riding for distances, where we've had a chance to chat. Just a couple sheriffs in the car and me, Chris Ann Hall, Sheriff Nick Finch, Sheriff Richard Mack, and me behind the wheel. We've spent time together. He's a great man. And if he weren't, he would not be a USAPrepares.com instructor. If I didn't trust him, he would not be on the air with us. He would be removed. And let me just say this. This is probably the first time I will have mentioned this. There are just a couple individuals who let me down, who have done something that I thought was just slightly less than I expected. They're gone. They're gone. They are no longer part of USAPrepares.com.
Being above reproach, absolutely.
Absolutely. So Richard Mack is one of us, and I'm here with you to defend him. That was not our plan today. Our plan was to talk about corruption in Arizona, and we'll get back to that. Shane Harger, we'll be right back. Shane Harger's with us. He's the former chief of police of Jemez Springs, New Mexico, a CSPOA member. And Shane, since you and I met, your life has become way more complicated. Wouldn't you say?
To say the least. To say the least.
Yeah. And you've been robbed at gunpoint. Yes. You've been accused of fraudulent collecting of unemployment.
Yes.
What else has happened?
It's just been a spiral. Once everything was fine. When I was chief of police, we were just throwing bad guys in jail, getting people their stolen property back, defending the rights of rape victims. There's a particular rape case we were working, and just really trying to make leaps and bounds. Got commendation from the mayor, the city council, really handsome raise. Received a citizens award for my citizens, which meant more to me than anything else. The fact that my citizens were telling me, "Hey, you're doing a great job, and we really like what you're doing." My officers were happy. Everything was wonderful until I attended a CSPOA meeting. After that, I lose my job. I am denied collecting benefits for unemployment. I fought it. Ultimately, was given my unemployment benefits. Since then, an investigation was opened up. They tried to accuse me of fraudulently obtaining unemployment benefits, which is a no-brainer. Either I'm employed or I'm not. You fired me. I'm obviously unemployed. And, a heroin case that I was working, there was a suspect in the vehicle who alleged 2 months after the arrest, that she was fondled, and all of this stuff in light of all of the news media and the rhetoric and the nonsense coming down through Hannah Springs. So for whatever reason, I went from hero to zero in 2 days. And the only thing that happened between the time I left and the time I got back was I attended a CSPOA meeting. And so, I'm keenly aware that there's something much larger than myself, something much larger than Shane Harger going on in the background. Now, my Bible, the scripture that I read, says that, yea, all those who choose to live godly will suffer persecution. Now, that coupled with the old adage, no good deed will go unpunished, and that's, to sum it up, that's sort of where I'm at on this. I was robbed at gunpoint, and I thought it was just a typical robbery. Thankfully, I did not have to take a human life. It came very close to that, but I'm very thankful that everything worked out. We now have people in custody. But I started being questioned about that from family members and other law enforcement officers saying, Shane, are you sure this was just a robbery? Or was someone trying to send you a message? Because it was just a little hinky. I mean, how did they know where you were at, who you were, exactly the place you were going to be and what time you were going to be there? And I started putting the puzzles together and trying to look at it objectively. And yeah, all things considered, it doesn't pass the sniff test. When you look at the accusations that started being hurled at me after I attended the CSPOA meeting, and suddenly, somebody follows me and robs me at gunpoint, and so on and so forth. And then you look at what's happened here in Las Vegas. It just really appears to me, don't call me a conspiracy theorist when I say this, okay? But it really appears to me that things are being provocateured on so many different levels nationwide, not just in my situation, but just nationwide. A prime example, there's a very well-known radio personality by the name of Alex Jones, and he's been out on the streets doing promos and covering footage before, and had women come up to him that he's never met in his life and basically just throw themselves at him and try and get photos taken with him and trying to discredit him. That's on record, circumstances like that. And boy, there was this hollow, eerie echo in my head when I thought about what's going on with Sheriff Richard Mack. Somebody just shows up that he's never met before. Gee golly, let me get my picture taken with you. Then they decide to show up out at the Bundy Ranch. They're escorted off the property by the militia, and then they go out and murder a bunch of cops. And suddenly, on national news, they're trying to paint Alex Jones and Sheriff Mack and others as the brainchild behind this murder of our fellow police officers.
Which is absolutely nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. So, yes, we do have provocateurs. And we've had, Shane, we've had them at the meetup at Ziggy's. I'll talk a little bit about that when we get back, and let's talk about police corruption. Shane Harger, USAPrepares.com. Class, we got a meetup on Monday, and it's movie night at Ziggy's. We're going to show the video that Dane Wigington produced. It's his video. And it's about geoengineering and the collapse of civilization through the spraying and modification of our weather. So we're going to show the video first. First will be a monologue by me, my thoughts on the news and my views. Then we show the video. And then there'll be a live question and answer session with Dane Wigington. And he'll be connected via a teleseminar. So you'll be able to ask him your questions of the expert about geoengineering. Geoengineeringwatch.org. That's Monday, 5:30, Ziggy's, Sunshine, and Glenstone. Shane Harger's with us. Shane, you're talking about provocateurs. And we have had provocateurs at our Monday night meetup. We've had a meetup every week except for a couple times for Christmas or Thanksgiving. But other than that, we've had a meetup every week for over 3 years. And some of these provocateurs will try to sneak in and they'll try their best to say things that are 180 degrees from the point of view that I express on the radio and at the meetups. and they are disruptive. And sometimes others will be there, and they'll try to record what I say at the meetups. And what I simply do is I go up to them and I welcome them. And I let them know that I know exactly who they are, and I know that everyone else will soon know who they are. And they always do the same thing. I say, hey, I'm Vince Finelli. I'm glad you're here. Thanks so much for coming. And your name is? And
Wow.
Okay. And then I say, you guys are in the booth here together. I know you want to meet some new friends, and then I'll call over some of our seasoned students who will sit with them. I usually have ladies go sit with them, and the ladies will sit next to them and smile, and they know exactly what's going on. And these ladies are just brilliant at the way they do it. They're just very, they're very congenial, and they'll look at these guys and say, "Hi, I'm glad you're here." And the guys will feel so uncomfortable because they know they've been found out, and they will leave within minutes. But some will try to stay, make their comments, throw their salvos out, and unfortunately for them, I have the microphone. And I have to put them in their place very, very quickly and very hard, and then they leave. So I have seen these provocateurs. Now, when you talk about Richard Mack and the photographs, things happen when you're in the media. And for example, I was in the right near the studio at KWTO, right near the studio, but at the radio station. And I was in the back there, back room. It's a very large back room where there are a whole bunch of cubicles. And I happened to be walking through, and this guy raced through. I'd never met this guy before, and he said, "Are you somebody?" And I said, "Well, yeah, actually I am. I'm the guy that makes sure that the carpets are cleaned, at night." And he looked at me and said, "Well, I'm collecting autographs. I guess I might as well get yours." So I said,
Wow.
"Okay, I can do that." That was the first autograph and the only autograph that I've ever given. It's the only guy that ever asked me, and he wanted my autograph because he was collecting everybody's at the station. He had no idea who I was. He had no idea whether I was kidding him or not. But what I'm saying is, so somebody could take that autograph and say, "Well, I met Finelli. Here's his autograph." Now, I don't know who he is. I probably would never recognize him again, and I'd probably not recognize some of the people who have asked to have their pictures taken with me, or some of the people at our expo that I've seen have their pictures taken with Richard Mack. So you're absolutely right. These things are being used against us, and the media, the old media, is responsible. What do they? Don't they realize that we are on their side, that we are protecting their freedoms, and there aren't a lot of us doing it? I mean, Alex Jones is, and there's some others. There are about 300 of us that I believe are actually involved in taking back America.
Well, I don't agree with everything that Alex Jones has said or stands for. I don't agree with everything that Sheriff Mack has said. There's, he's entitled to his own opinion. That's what makes us each unique as individuals. But I can tell you this: in no way is Alex Jones or Sheriff Mack, the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, or the Bundy Ranch in any way implicit in soliciting or promoting the mass murder of anyone, let alone fellow police officers. And so I would say to anyone that's out there listening, open your eyes, do your own research, and see things for what they are. There's a pattern of conduct here. In every single one of these shootings, they have the same common thread, and it's always blamed on anyone standing for liberty. There was forensic analysis done allegedly of the computers of the shooters, and they frequently viewed the Alex Jones show. They frequented the CSPOA website and also the Oath Keepers website and other libertarian websites. Well, good for them if they're studying liberty. If you go to a library and you study the library, does that mean the librarian is somehow conspiring together to commit mass murder? No. It simply means that someone was researching at that location. And so I would say people should really use common sense and good judgment. The old media is doing everything they can to try to bring down those that are standing for liberty, to try and discredit those. And what they don't realize is the tyranny that they're working for will soon be turned against them.
Well, I just, as you were saying this, I just pulled up some of the history of some of my searches. And, yesterday I was looking at pollution from the NASA space program. I looked up Hillary Clinton breaking furniture at the White House. I mean, and I've been to Alex Jones' website, Infowars.com. I've done a lot of the things that you're talking about, and those and more. And I believe that those searches could be used against me and you as well. So it's out of control, and the media should stand behind we the people. They really should. And what are they thinking? Really, do they really think that we are advocating anarchy? Because that is not what we're advocating. We are not advocating civil war and violence and revolution, and we are not advocating anything other than peace.
No, not at all. And, in the last days, good shall be called evil, and evil shall be called good. And that seems to be what's transpiring. I think we're certainly in a perilous time, and people really need to be prepared. It's one of the things that drew me to your show is USA Prepares, educating people and getting them to prepare for what's coming down the pipe. There's nothing wrong with being ready to take care of yourself medically, physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever the case may be. That's just the basic human rights. And I admire you and what you're doing for trying to educate people and trying to show people that there are tools out there that can help them through very difficult times when they come their way, be it your car stalled on a roadway during a flash flood, or you're camping and get snake bit, or who knows, FBI decides to throw a hood over your face and rendition you to Guantanamo Bay because you defend the Constitution.
You're absolutely right. And evil shall be called good. In that light, would you like to talk about some of the corruption in policing? Would you like to talk about that?
Absolutely. I mean, it's prevalent. It's certainly prevalent. The dinosaur media and also the modern media has been covering that. It sort of hits home here locally in Albuquerque. Right now, the Department of Justice is investigating the City of Albuquerque Police Department for wrongdoing. They are 4 times the national average for murder or deadly use of force, whichever you want to call it. When you shoot an unarmed homeless man in the back for camping, as far as I'm concerned, that's murder. And some people say, well, he had a knife on his side. Well, who cares? You can be armed and not dangerous. A knife is a tool. A car can kill someone just as dead as a firearm, but no one's advocating outlawing motor vehicles. No one's getting shot for driving down the road. And so that's the sort of thing that's happening in my locale. Now, I have inside information right now about the Albuquerque Police Department with the U.S. Department of Justice breathing down their neck. And I'm not at liberty to disclose all of the details, but what I can tell you is that from the very highest level down, there are people within the ranks of the Albuquerque Police Department who have conspired together to cover up unjustifiable homicide, cover up murder, see to it that evidence was suppressed, that it never saw the light of day, to intimidate witnesses that are attempting to cooperate with the U.S. Department of Justice, and so on and so forth. So corruption is certainly there, and it's prevalent. I think in your area, there's a situation that you might be able to touch on lightly, wherein someone ran for office, and basically they won, and next thing you know, they're in handcuffs and shipped off to jail for the next 5 years.
Well, absolutely. And he's in prison right this moment, and we are doing our best to get him out. And his name is Mike Parsons. He's a USAPrepares.com instructor. There has been conspiring and collusion with not only him, but other USAPrepares.com instructors. One of our instructors I introduced, as I said, I'm delighted to introduce our newest USAPrepares.com instructor. He's a convicted rapist. He's a convicted murderer, and he didn't do it. And he sued the community for for millions of dollars, and he was awarded it, but he spent 15 years in maximum security prison for a crime
No
that
way.
he did not commit. Yes, he did. Yeah, he did. Jeffrey Deskovic. And he committed no crime. And what happened was he was a student in high school. One of his classmates was murdered. And this was in upstate New York. And so what happened was the community or the police force solicited the assistance of New York City profilers. They said, well, it's going to be someone who's withdrawn and really deeply upset. And boy, oh boy, that fit Jeffrey Deskovic. They interrogated him for 7.5 hours, didn't give him any food, just gave him coffee. He'd never had it before. He was absolutely maxed out on caffeine. He was on the floor crying, and ultimately he was convicted of murder. Spent 15 years in the prison, maximum security. Shane Harger is with us, and Shane, I just sent Jeffrey Deskovic an email asking him if he'd like to come back on the radio with us. Yeah, he was a young man, and I thought it was 15 years. It was actually 16 years that he spent in maximum security prison for a crime he didn't commit. And one of the reasons why is the judge informed the jury just before a holiday that they were going to stay over until they came to a decision. And they said, oh man, who wants to spend the holiday here in being sequestered? So they decided that the most expedient thing to do would be to find this man guilty. So he spent the next 16 years in maximum security prison. So it happens, and it's outrageous. And Mike Parsons is another case. He won an election, and the next thing is he finds himself in prison. And they want to make sure he's not available to run again during this election cycle right now. So they've got to keep him in prison so he can't do what he promised to do, which was audit Tipton County, Tennessee. Back to you.
My gracious, I'm sort of at a loss of words. You and I discussed briefly yesterday. We spoke, and I'm sure you could tell that our conversation was being held with my having a very heavy heart.
Absolutely.
I'm looking at all of the things that are happening. If you look at what's happening in our society, in our country, the very moral fabric is being just eviscerated. Our Constitution is being stripped away from us, and in the words of George Bush, it's just a GD piece of paper. You can read between the lines of my abbreviations, but
Sure.
I'm just utterly shocked at the way things are going, and I don't know how much more I can stand. We spoke a while back about tolerance. How much will people put up with? How much will people stand? And I don't know how much longer I'm able to deal with this. I covet the prayers of your listeners, anyone that would lift me up in prayer and lift up Sheriff Mack. This is a difficult thing that we're doing. I'm the regional spokesman for the CSPOA for this district, and I can tell you there's a lot going on behind the scenes. When you're out there talking to people and trying to educate people about liberty and about the Constitution and what this country was founded on, it drains you, and it takes away from your time that could be spent golfing, fishing, time spent with my family, whatever else I could be doing. But I choose to spend this time trying to take care of what's important in life and trying to keep this country afloat. And so it's wearing me down. It's taking its toll on me. All of the corruption that I see here locally, the corruption within my own agency there at the Hema Springs Village, it really does wear you down.
Shane, I can hear this in your voice because I know you better than our broadcast classroom does, because I've spent more time with you in person, on the telephone, off the air, and on the air. And I can tell in your voice that you are, I believe that you've been threatened in many different ways and in many different approaches. I know there have been drive-bys of your home. I know that there have been situations that have put you in danger, as well as the armed robbery that happened. And I know that that the state police are asking questions about you. So a lot of this pressure is tough to take. It really is. And I don't know if people, the 97%ers who don't get it, have any idea of what we're talking about. So, class, I'd like to ask you if you're of the opinion that prayer works. I'd like to ask you to consider saying some prayers for Shane Harger, his family, Sheriff Richard Mack, and his family. They can use them right now. Shane, thanks so much for being with us today. This is going to be a long and protracted fight to restore the United States to the way it was, to the Constitution and to the Bill of Rights. And George Bush, I heard him say exactly what you're saying. The Constitution is just a GD piece of paper. I saw him say it. It's an outrage.
Wow.
It's an outrage. Shane, thanks so much for being with us. Class, above all, honesty and integrity. What happens next is up to you.